Hi there. February 27th, 2021. Where to start? There's a lot to talk about this week. First of all, I had a great week. Personally, a great week. I've decided, well, I don't know if I've decided that. Probably that's not the right word. But I realized just how wonderful my life is. And that includes a lot of the changes that have taken place in terms of technological advancements. Earlier this week, my grand niece had her 6th birthday, and I was able to FaceTime. I mean, it's so wonderful that I can FaceTime people that I care about that I can't see in person on a regular basis. And so just to be able to see their face, to talk with them, to talk with Lindsay, her mother, and Kaylee, and Tyson. I mean, FaceTime alone is a wonderful technology. So the reason I want to bring this up is that there's just a lot of sense among conservatives. And I try to stay away from this kind of talk. That what's America coming to? This is so terrible. We're losing, like this, everything is bad. And I actually don't think it is. There are so many tools available to us today that were not available. Like, think about when I was young and wanting to learn about things. I would say in my early 20s. So I belonged to the Book of the Month Club. Now I got to read the Gulag Archipelago. But who decided what the Book of the Month Club was? I would read the newspaper every day, and I would read Time and Newsweek. Time and Newsweek, or there was another one that I liked too, I forgot the name of it, but I would read these. So the information that came to me was already hugely filtered. But what can we do today? Or, if you had a medical condition, what did you do? You would have to go to a local library, and particularly a library associated with a university, let's say, and look through microfiche to see old articles. If you want to learn about something, you needed an encyclopedia. But look how out of date that was. Look at the access we have to information. The thing is, you have to look for this information. But, I mean, it's just marvelous what we can get. What I can learn, I pick a subject, I want to learn about it. There is so much information. Also, I can still read books. So now I can order a book. I used to have to go to the bookstore. If I found a book somehow that I wanted to, I'd put an order in for the book. And then in 2 weeks or so, they would call me up at the bookstore and say it's ready. And then I would have to go pick it up. But now, click a button on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and I get the book a day or two later. Huge numbers of wonderful ways. And the people that I listen to, one of the issues for me is I don't have time to listen to all the great voices out there. It's not so much on the television anymore, because even good programs, like on Newsmax or One America News, they don't go into depth, but I can get long form interviews and learn so much and read articles. I think decide I want to learn about something, I can do it. So the technology is great. Don't forget that. We have made huge technological advances. We've made huge advances in medicine. I mean, there's a poignant story. Calvin Coolidge, he's at the White House, and I think it was his 14-year-old son, stubbed his toe playing tennis. And then it got gangrene or something, and he died. And Calvin Coolidge was never the same after that. That just kind of broke him up. But most people, I'm not saying everybody, But most people who have children can expect their child to live to adulthood and live a long life. That's the norm. So while we're thinking about all of these things, remind ourselves about what is good, what has been improved. And we'll fight the other stuff. But our values are our values. They're going to be there. But I don't want to live in a theocracy, for example. I want people to be able to have different viewpoints. So I'm reminding myself that if you are smart, and when I say smart, I mean smart like, not like IQ and you got degrees. No, not that kind of smart. But if you're discerning and you think and do your research, there is so much out there. Like, for example, my niece Lindsay, she had a problem with one of her children when they were a baby, and the doctors didn't know what the problem was, but she figured it out. She found the information on the internet. She finally figured out what the problem was and solved it. Those tools simply were not available before. Your only source of information on medicine is what your doctor told you. So, for people that want to, you can really, the world today is really good. Yes, we'll always have to fight stuff. We'll always have to fight encroachments. But they can't keep us down. There's just too many sources of information. So I've been listening to some of the CPAC speeches, and I think it's really wonderful that they were able, what's going on now, President Trump is going to speak tomorrow on Sunday. But you have all these great speakers. And by the way, my thought about 2024, I'm very impressed thus far with Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and I heard Mike Pompeo speak. And Mike Pompeo, he's clearly thinking politics by the way he gave his speech. And I thought it was very impressive. Because what I'm looking for is not only someone who has good policies, but somebody who can make things happen and someone who can take the heat. Someone who knows how to make things happen, who knows how to pick a good team, who knows how to project strength, and who is not going to wither like our Vice President Pence did. In terms of, I don't want to get criticized. So that to me is critical. So I'm a little concerned Mike Pompeo has a lot of weight on him, but he has a nice posture and he looks good. I thought his delivery of his speech, I thought it was good. So I'm going to be watching him. Now you can say, well, what about President Trump? I don't know. I mean, obviously, if President Trump wants to run in 2024. But I don't actually think it's a good idea. Because I'm very, very, very well aware of what age does to you. And he's also got weight on him. But he can do so much more as an advisor, as kind of a senior statesman for the Republican Party, as really the power behind the throne. By the way, another thing I like about Mike Pompeo and Ron DeSantis is they've never, ever dissed Trump. That is sine qua non for me. If you've dissed Trump, I want nothing to do with you in terms of politics. These people who've done that, I have a visceral anger about that. So, still, it's fun to listen to all the up-and-coming people because you notice some Republicans did not show up. They are persona non grata for most of the Republican Party. They're going to learn that this is a new party. So there's a lot we can do here, and I'm excited. I'm optimistic. And we're always, always, always going to have these battles. Always going to have these battles. So if you are depressed and disturbed, overly so, I'm not saying a little bit, then ask yourself, how can you empower yourself? What can you do? And what are you going to do? And just recognize that we've exchanged one set of problems for another set of problems. But the problems are still there. Like I personally, let me just, as I've mentioned many times before, around 2015, when I was starting to think, okay, I'm becoming a Republican because of the whole climate alarmism, after I'd looked into it, I mean, that was a big transition for me, a huge transition. And one of the things happened is, as I've been reading my journal from those days, I was so angry because it was like a shock at how to listen to what people were saying that had no science behind it, and how they dissed people, good, solid scientists, how they were treated. It was so wrong. And by the way, if you don't know a lot about a subject, and the arguments against some viewpoint comprise just dissing the person, that's called an ad hominem attack, attack the man, and not the argument, then a red flag should go up in your mind that something is going on here and want to look into it. But when you think about the future, this sense of foreboding. So I'm going to be discussing some things that I've heard some people talk about, and why I'm not worried about it. Now, it is clear that China is our threat now, and I'll touch on some of that. That's a new one, you know, before it used to be the Soviet Union, but it's definitely China. It is definitely China on so many different levels. But it's not something to be depressed about, because ultimately we will prevail. I mean, first we just have to become aware of what's going on. And that's what's happening now. People are becoming aware. I mean, if you weren't aware before, oh my God, you know, since the Chinese Communist Party virus, the CCP virus, was let loose. And think about that. We let them shut down all the economies. We did it to ourselves. And yet, they let that virus out of Wuhan. So let me touch on something about the Texas blackouts. Because this came into a discussion that Robert and I were having about what some of the mainstream media has been writing about, like problems with even their gas-fired plants, or even some of their coal plants, because you can see that the left is scrambling to explain the problems in Texas with the electrical grid when they had this power outage, you know, somehow because of the fossil fuels. And here is the point. And Alex Epstein, so I got this from townhall.com, I get their newsletter. But he sent out some tweets. In fact, he kind of got a 2-day fame, I guess, because he was very knowledgeable. But he said, a tale of two places, Texas versus Alberta, Canada. In Texas, a spike in demand during cold temperatures led to devastating blackouts. In Alberta, Canada, a spike in demand during far colder temperatures led to very little disruption. Why? because Alberta has a reliable, resilient grid, electrical grid, with 43% coal and 49% gas. You see, one of the things that is incredibly important, because you could say, well, why did this happen? I forgot what Robert told me he had read, that they didn't do right with the coal-fired power plant. If there's no incentive for the power companies to focus on reliability, and that includes California, if there's no incentive to check out the maintenance of their lines so you don't spark a fire, that should be the number one criteria, reliability. Now you could say, oh, but Texas, they never have that cold weather. It's very rare. That is exactly the point. When it's extremely hot or extremely cold or any kind of extreme weather situation, that's when you need power the most. Let that sink in. You don't plan the power for the nice days when the sun is shining, the wind is blowing. No. You've got to think of the absolute worst case scenario. I mean, look at Fukushima, which was very overblown in the nuclear. When I say overblown, nobody really died, but it was the disruption that caused a lot of the problems. But what happened, they couldn't cool it down because they placed their power generators or backup generators to cool the nuclear reactor. They placed them where, if you have a tsunami hit, sorry, they're going to be underwater and they're not working. So in any kind of resilient system that you need to be resilient, you have to think of the possibilities of what could go wrong. And you have to make it resilient against that. Period. That should be what power companies do. Instead, power companies are incentivized to, let's go renewable. They don't really get penalized. There's no incentive to say, well, wait a minute, we're relying too much on this. Oh no, because you just want to be 100% renewable. So it's crazy, okay? In our country today, we should never have power outages, period. If we have a glitch, let's fix it. But people don't understand. They take it for granted that the power is going to be there. They don't understand what happens when power is not on, when you don't have it. And our policies, particularly these so-called green policies, that they use terms that sound good. Oh, it's green, it's renewable. And they don't think it through. They don't think it through. And we're not going to have it. We are so reliant on having, heating and cooling. That's obviously very important. But also, we communicate. We have to have electricity to communicate. We have to have fuel for deliveries. You're going to rely on electric vehicles? So there's another interesting thing I want to talk about related to that, and I will pin this tweet. I'm not saying you have to listen to it, but I really enjoyed a discussion or an interview that Alex Epstein had with Maxwell Goldberg, a young man who recently graduated from college, on Our Dangerous Material Dependence on China was the title. So I'll pin a link to that. And what I found this fascinating and interesting on two counts. One was, I love seeing young people who are educating themselves and thinking these things through and are carrying on the battle. I love it. Because as we get older, we older people, as we get older, we've got to get the younger people to carry on the battle. Now, I hope to be in the battle a long time. I do everything I can, but eventually I won't be in the battle anymore. So just listening to this young man talk was just very gratifying. And also notice, you see, one of the ways I know someone's good is how they're very careful not to say more than what they know. So I liked his language. Well, I don't have a lot of empirical data on this, but here's where it appears to be going. So I just enjoyed listening to him, and I listened to it twice. But let me say so you can get into the whole, and even the Biden administration is recognizing this. We are dependent on too many materials, particularly like rare earth elements, from China. We need to fix this. The Trump administration did start to fix this. But here's the key. Here's another point for all the people who want to go renewables. Okay, let's just say renewables, wind turbines and all that was great, and they weren't unreliable and whatever. You are putting such a stress, and what this young man, Maxwell Goldberg, pointed out is, where do these materials come from? All of these renewable things require, people just invent things or think about things, including our iPhone. Where do we get the materials? These are reliant on materials from China. And if we increase our amount of, let's say, renewables, even something like batteries, which require a lot of lithium, those aren't rare earths, but we just don't have enough. We do not have enough, period. So you can't think, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, whatever. And of course, China loves it because they manufacture the stuff. And they can do it in inhumane, horrible conditions environmentally, and we're buying from them to be renewable. And we think, oh, they said that they're going to be net zero. That is just such BS. They're playing us, people. They are playing us. They're building coal-fired power plants like crazy. Okay? So is India. They're going to do this because they're not stupid. And we're just like, oh, we'll deindustrialize, we'll do this, and we'll go renewable. And these people just want to ruin all the good things that we have. And it's like, we need to educate people. Fortunately, even the Biden administration. So and again, this is wonderful because I am able to get this information. So I had all kinds of plans, how I'm going to read and study up. But here was a Forbes article that I copied out. Let's see. And I saw a brief snippet on television where Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, he was talking about that too. They're worried, okay? So even the Biden administration, but see, all of that conflicts with all these renewable ideas. Unreliable. We have just got to get off that. I don't know how we do it, but we've got to get off it. The environmentalists that want to stop pipelines, this is nuts, people, nuts. Now, one of the things I talked about last week is it's a solution for something that's not a problem. CO2 emissions are not a problem. And let me remind you what CO2 is. This doesn't make the argument completely, but it's just kind of interesting to think about. CO2 is carbon, one atom of carbon, and 2 atoms of oxygen. So I was responding to one of Lindsay's, my niece's comment on the last video. I said, all the amino acids, protein building blocks, all the amino acids are composed of only 4 elements. Do you know what those 4 are? I'll give you a moment to think about it. carbon, look at, I'm actually reading it, I don't want to make a mistake. Hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen. That's it. So, when you think about the cycles and that plants need CO2, somehow we've mesmerized. People think, oh, this is horrible. No, it's true. If very high CO2 levels created a problem, a serious problem, but there is nothing in the Earth's past that indicate that, and we've had far higher CO2 levels than we do now. Plant life and life, animal life, flourished. Okay? I still see people talking about the environment and, you know, Mike Pompeo, you know, he said, good that we got out of the Paris Climate Accord, you know, but we still need to focus on the environment and whatever. And I'm like, ugh, has nothing to do with the environment, okay? Nothing to do with the environment. All our measures to try to lower CO2, which would not be a good idea at this point, not a good idea at all, but all our measures to lower CO2, what we think lowers CO2, will create a toxic environment. All these incredibly toxic materials that we can only get from China. And then where are they going to go? What are you going to do with all these? I mean, you might be able to recycle some, but we don't know yet how to do that. So we'll have all these toxic solar panels and wind turbines, the materials, just in taking up all kinds of space. Because it's a very diffuse form of energy. So it's just nuts, people. Let's call a spade, it's nuts. So when I think about who I want to support as a Republican candidate, I understand, like President Trump, he couldn't really just say it, because if he calls it a hoax, which it is, but if he calls it that, the attacks are relentless, so he just kind of made fun of it. But he knows it's not for real. I love that about him. I love that about him. And how do I know that he knew it wasn't for real? There was a very good interview with Will Happer, fabulous physicist, who worked for a while in the White House. And in one of the interviews, he was talking, he said, nah, President Trump knows. You know, so in private conversations, he knows. So, we can have a reliable grid. That should be our focus. That should be our focus. And you know, when I'm talking about technology too, so it was just interesting when Robert was here yesterday, the things that we were doing. We both had our laptops, I had my iPad, and we were watching videos discussing it, and then when I was doing something else, he was listening to a lecture, some guy who does the origins of the universe, but he was a Nobel Prize winner. And so we were in the so basically he received a Nobel Prize for explaining how the strong force can combine quarks. If you're not in like that kind of physics. But anyway, it occurred to me, let me just say one of the things that's interesting about physics, kind of what you might call fundamental physics, is that there are only considered to be 4 forces in the universe. Do you know what those are? Okay. There's the strong and the weak, and those operate at the nuclear level, and electromagnetic. Now, the weak and electromagnetic kind of got combined by Steve Weinberg, which, by the way, Harold and I went to Austin, Texas to have dinner with him. I arranged it because Harold wanted to meet him. Anyway, that was fun. But in the early 70s, Steve Weinberg and some other people got a Nobel Prize for that. But So there's always been this attempt to unify these four forces. The problem has been gravity. Gravity doesn't act the same way. So that's how all the string theory and all this stuff. But what's so interesting is these people have been working on this forever and ever and ever. It's like a never-ending search to find some one unifying force. And I sometimes wonder about the physicists that try to work on this. That's kind of a religion for them. But even if you find it, the one unifying force, what have you really learned about what really goes on in the universe? I notice that a lot with science. It's very reductionist in its approach. And there's a lot of people that think in those ways. But that's not good enough. And those of you who are religious or spiritual, you know that. That's why Michael Crichton, who passed away like in 2006, his book Travels. Philip Rulin told me about it, and I love that book because I kind of think like Michael Crichton. I mean, he's still scientific, but he's also, okay, well, here's some interesting things that I can't really explain, but this is what's happened. So I'm pointing that out because I was listening to Steve Bannon's War Room. That's one I really like listening to. I like the interplay, the people he brings on. But they talked about transhumanism. And some of you may have heard of this. So let me just give you my take on transhumanism. Don't worry about it. I'll tell you why I think you don't need to worry about it. Because the people that are wanting that, I've kind of been in that crowd a little bit. And it's a chimera. It's not going to happen. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting is a certain kind of guy. It's kind of a male thing, I think. And I'm not saying all males are like this, but that think in this reductionist term. And they also, and I've seen this in all kinds of neuroscience research, where they focus just on neurons and not the connections, not brain waves. There's so many things about the brain and the body that I don't think scientists get. I mean, they can do some things very, very well, no question, no question. But it's limited in what it can do. So one of the things I did, because you know I'm into longevity. So they talk about gene therapies and with this whole transhumanism, like they're going to try to live a long time. And come on, I'm trying to take advantage of everything to live a long time. And I'm telling you, it's not that easy. And we can't even get the coronavirus right. We overreact. It's like, oh my God, let's all wear masks. Let's all stay indoors. Oh, I can't get this. Really? They don't know diddly, okay? So don't let it scare you. I mean, kind of interested in, but I hear this like to scare you about China too. Oh, they're doing genetic, to make these superhumans and even at Caltech, they call it like bioengineering. And I came to the conclusion that a lot of the things where you have these mechanical devices that help a person, while it's all well and good, I prefer things that figure out how does the body heal itself, and let's do that. That's why I'm more interested in exosomes, and even some genetic engineering is fine, particularly if you have a genetic defect. But if we can find, like, why do some people, they don't get old until they're like 100, and others get old? Is there something in their genes that's doing that? Yeah, why shouldn't we take advantage of that? Why does this happen to this? Why does this person get Parkinson's? This doesn't, okay? There's a lot of environmental influences, but I don't No, I don't think it's about toxins and stuff like that. There's very few toxins, and that's why you have a liver and kidneys. There were a lot more toxins when I was growing up. But you can't even get something as simple as, come on people, we need vitamin D, which I take a lot of. And by the way, my eyes have gotten better. I don't need my reading glasses anymore. I had a very low thing, but I make sure I get light in my eyes every day. And I take all kinds of carotenoids and stuff, not in terms of food, but in terms of supplements. And I exercise my eyes. I was just thinking that I needed the doctor, I needed to go to the dentist, I needed all of that a lot more, say, in my late 20s and early 30s than I do now at age 67. So I'm not sure what it is I'm doing, but I do take a lot of supplements. But also I have learned how powerful the brain is. And when I say the brain, not the brain as a separate entity, so all this singularity talk and you're going to be able to put the human brain in a computer. The human brain in a computer would not be a human brain. Because so much of our decision making, so much of what we do, it's a mind-body connection. You know, when they tried to talk about Spock being logical, and there's been huge amounts of studies that have shown if you don't have a feeling in your body, it's very hard to make a decision. How do you make a decision between doing this or doing this? You get a feeling about it. Oh, there's been study after study showing that. Your body, emotion it's through your body. So there's so many problems that people have. Physical issues. And I'm not talking about people who have genetic issues and bless their heart. I mean, there are just some things that you're born with or for whatever reason you get. And you have my sympathies. I'm lucky, but I won't always be lucky, okay? We all have term limits. I call those term limits. Aging and dying, it's term limits. So some of us can go longer than others. So I never feel like it's your fault if you've got some kind of problem that you don't know how to solve. But what I do know is, especially for problems that come and go, it's almost always something to do with unconscious thoughts or unconscious programming. I mean, it is amazing. It is amazing what the brain can do. Amazing what the brain can do. I mean, I used to read everything I can get my hands on. I mean, you can have people go into like a comatose state. Like there was, I don't need to go into detail because I don't remember the details, but or cramping up into these weird, awful positions, and it's all from the brain. Now, when you say it's from the brain, you can't go to that person and say, it's all in your head. That's the mistake people make. It's in your head in a way that you don't know how to control it. And the example I use to make it very simple for people is, like I'm standing here, if somebody just threw a snake at me, okay, my body would go haywire. I'd have an immediate rush of adrenaline. My heart would start beating fast, whatever the reaction would be to a snake being thrown at me. Now, did I consciously want that? But my eyes and my brain saw the snake coming at me and it reacted like that. So that's not a conscious decision. I can't say, well, you know what, I'm not gonna be scared of snakes. I'm just gonna stand here and nothing's gonna happen. I cannot control that. I mean, I could do exposure therapy over time. There's things I could do to mitigate that if I knew that the snake was not dangerous for whatever reason. But my point is that our brains are far, far more powerful. So I kind of laugh at these guys that think somehow we could be this like bionic person. They put too much emphasis just on this part of the brain. So anyway, I went to Radfest in 2017 and 2018. Now Radfest is Revolution Against Aging and Death, which is a really title. A revolution against aging and death, like we're going to live forever. But I wanted to get plugged into that community. I already had been a long-time subscriber to Life Extension magazine and always was taking supplements and the like. So I went in 2017. The first one was in 2016, but because of Harold and needing to take care of him, I couldn't go. I didn't want to go. So anyway, I went there, and the first one was pretty interesting because I got plugged into a lot of the people. I had it in my mind, all these people I wanted to meet and talk to, and I did. But here's what struck me. So this is a revolution against aging and death. And most of the people there did not look very healthy. There were a few exceptions, but they were sitting in a darkened room, which you need light, people. They were immobile most of the day. Sitting is terrible. Too much sitting is absolutely not good for your health. And I got the impression that they were just looking for some magic bullet. And then Bill Fallon, he was like the head of, I got a chance to talk with him. He was super nice. But here he's like this. He's like my age. I said, Bill, you gotta fix your posture. And I got a chance to tell him, that I didn't like the covers of some of the Life Extension magazines because they were trying to scare you, like, oh, be careful of this, be careful of that. Because if you're thinking fear about your body, that can actually make you sick. And I noticed they haven't done that since then. But he was very, very nice. And he goes, oh, you're good for me, trying to get me to stand up straight. But I'm like, you need to fix your posture. Come on. And I got to meet Liz Parrish, whom I really liked. Just beautiful woman. She had done some genetic therapy, and Bill Andrews had done telomerase. So I got to meet everybody I wanted to meet, and it was an interesting group. When I went again in 2018, I was just starting to get a little disillusioned with it, if you will. But I distinctly remember, and here's someone who's really into this transhumanism and the singularity, Ray Kurzweil. So he was speaking, he was standing up on the stage. And he was born in 1948, and they say, oh, he's taking 200 supplements a day. Well, I take a lot of supplements myself. Okay, so that doesn't, like he's changing his body chemistry. But he was up there on the stage, and he was born in 1948, so this was 2018, so he's 70 years old. And all I could think was, when Harold was 70 years old, oh my God, he looks so much better than Ray Kurzweil did. Because Ray Kurzweil, like one of the worst things is to have a belly, because that's called visceral fat, and that leads to a lot of trouble. So he kind of had a little pot belly. He just didn't look that vibrant or healthy. And so all these people were like listening rapidly, and I'm like, okay. It's kind of the way I feel about health. It's like, okay, I'm healthy. I'm 67. I'm fit. So I have some credibility when I give people health advice. But I'm not going to listen to somebody who doesn't look that great. Okay? But these are the people who think there's some magic thing. It's their religion. Let them have fun with it. But don't waste your time worrying about it. We humans, it's the same way I feel about going to Mars and other places. Like even this young man, Maxwell Goldberg, he wants to, go to the moon and Mars. I don't mind going to the moon. Moon's close enough, and you can come back. But Mars? I talked about this a long time ago in one of my videos. They don't understand how hard it is for people, what people need. We need social, we need change, we need the environment, we need to go outside, we need to have the sun on our backs. We need to have flowers. By the way, I did a lot of, worked with my gardener. I have beautiful flowers everywhere. And it's a lot of work, but you can see the purple lobelia type flowers here. My environment is just so gorgeous. I love it. But people don't understand. You can't just be in this sterile environment and be okay. You'll go crazy. I mean, we already found that with lockdowns. Look how depressed people got. Look how depressed. And some of these people live in kind of beautiful environment. I mean, we don't understand what makes for human health and flourishing. Now, we do understand, as conservatives, the importance of family, community, faith. All of those things have developed over time because that is what humans need. And humans want to work, they want to. These are the things that make for self-empowerment, happiness. These guys don't get it, okay? So don't worry about that stuff, okay? Don't worry about it. Just watch it and be amused. I mean, Harold used to go crazy thinking about these people trying to mine on the moon and mine on Mars. He just, But I feel like as long as our taxpayer money's not funding this stuff, if these guys want to believe this stuff, go ahead. But I remember hearing that one of the Google guys, I think it was Sergey Brin, you know, he was worried about, okay, don't quote me on this because I could have gotten it wrong. For all his money and all this stuff, you know, he's worried about Parkinson's. Can't remember why he's worried about Parkinson's, but I just remember reading that. And he's a young guy. I mean, one of the equalizing factors in this life is aging and dying. I think about these things a lot. Not, hopefully not in a morbid way, but I do think about it. I think about it, and the best we can hope for, and believe me, I try to stay on top of this stuff, is to be healthier, longer, and maybe extend the lifespan, which I've come to the conclusion that the reason nobody gets past, say, 116, 117 years old, there's some question about Jean Calment, a French woman, that maybe she didn't really live to 122 years, that might have been her daughter. But anyway, she was on record as the oldest person. But nobody gets past that. And as best I can tell, it's because you run out of stem cells in your bone marrow. That's as best I can tell. If I had to pinpoint one thing, that's why we end up dying. Most people die of other things earlier. Something else goes wrong. But let's just say everything else is okay. That's what will get you in the end. That's my opinion. So certainly all these other things that get people, we want to fix that. I'd like to figure out how to keep a healthy supply of stem cells. I'd like to live longer, but I'm not afraid of dying. For me, it's a game. I don't think dying would be bad, but I want to be around as long as possible. So one of the keys to that, it's very important, have younger friends. So I try to make more of my attachments to younger people, my close attachments. And I have plenty of those wonderful younger people in my life. So I can do that. Okay. Here's another, just a few random things. I was listening to Steven Crowder talking on Dave Rubin's show. And, you know, with conservatives going quiet, sort of like how the gays used to be, because you didn't want to come out. So what happens to the normal population, not normal population, that's not even the right word, but if conservatives are quiet about being conservative, then the only conservatives you hear about are going to be the ones that are really brave and loud and out there. Just like for many people, the only gay people they knew about were the flamboyant gays. But there's plenty of gay people like normal people. By the way, when it comes to gay people, as I look back through history, we've always had gay people of one form or another. I believe in acceptance for them, marriage, and whatever. But the big mistake we did was adding on transgender. Transgenderism is, to me, an abomination. Now, I'm not saying there's not occasional, very occasional cases where there's a problem. You almost like have, testes and ovaries, and you're two sexes, and you got to decide, or you want to decide. But this idea that you can change. Now, if you're an adult and you want to change, go for it. Because I do believe in personal autonomy, and if that's what you want to do, it certainly shouldn't be something that the government pays for, or the military gets involved in and pays for. That to me that's just horrible. That should not be, the military is about readiness. We don't need people who have a lot of physical problems in the military. That's not what it's for. It's about readiness. But a lot of people did not know how bad it is and what we're doing to children. But I'd found some videos, but they would get taken down. So if a pediatrician, they're horrified because they are required to not lose their license, that if a child needs to be treated with hormones to change their sex or whatever, they're required to do it. That is just horrible. So I was very glad to see Rand Paul question that man who was supposedly a woman who was like a robot. Because I think it was shocking to people that they would allow children. I remember, these are children that can't buy cigarettes, can't buy alcohol, but they can say, well, I'm a different sex, even as young as 3 years old, and they can change their sex. So I had to take a deep breath there. First of all, that is wrong, wrong, wrong. Now, how do we treat people like this? If it's a child, here's what I think. You be very kind to that child who has had this done to them. But I would shun the parents. Shun the parents that allowed that to be done. That's like shunning somebody who's child abuse, okay? Don't blame the child. Child doesn't know any different. But when you think about what children will do to gain their parents' love and attention, if they pick up the signal that mommy loves me more, daddy loves me more, if I'm this sex, and especially if the parent, like, look how cool I am, I have a transgendered child. I mean, I just have to say, well, okay, what can we as a society do this? I do not believe those people should be, right now, we treat them like heroes. Or if somebody who says, I'm a girl, when they're really a boy, and then they win the prize in some girls' competition, athletic competition, and that's happened. That has happened. We treat them like a hero. No, no, no. Okay? That's a little bit of social shaming we need to do. First of all, they should never be allowed. Just don't allow that category. I mean, if you're forced to do it for some reason and you've got a team, then have two different prizes. One for the pure girl prize and one for the who won the race. Okay, so everybody will know. Okay, they sort of won the race, the transgendered person, but not but who do we know really won? I mean, we've got to figure out a way around this until this craziness ends. I mean, it's bad. But it's been here. It's been here for a while. This is not like being gay. It's just something else. This is, we don't really have sex. Now, is, okay, maybe that's transhumanism on a really bizarre level. I don't know what that is, but it's wrong. It's totally wrong, and we need to shun the parents that do that for now. Don't go to their parties if they have a new gender thing. Don't be polite. That is evil, what they're doing. Because nothing in our society where we have let children make those decisions, and we absolutely can't have it be a situation where a child says, well, I'm this other sex and my parents won't let me change, and then the government or somebody can come in and say, you can't do that to this child. This child is allowed to change. Because you're already getting cases. Now, I don't think this is going to be a long-term problem, and I'll tell you why. Like a lot of things like this that happen, it takes a while, but there's going to be a lot of people who regret it. There's already a number of people who regret it. They get older and they think, oh my God, I've screwed myself up. So I feel very bad for those children who had abusive, and I'll call them that, abusive parents that did that to them when they could have just explained, no, we'll wait. Now, let me tell you something when I think about sex differences. I think of things as on a spectrum, okay? There's like most girls like this and most boys like this. But I also believe in looking at individual differences. For example, for whatever reason, I didn't really like playing with dolls, okay? But I did build a doll hospital in my closet with my girlfriend, okay? Because I liked nursing, and then when I read about Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell from a book I got at the library, then I was like a doctor, okay? But I really wasn't into that, and I had these inchoate dreams of like building a chemistry lab in the garage. So I didn't really have anybody to encourage me and say, hey, you know, and also I remember having some thoughts of like building a go-kart. I mean, I kind of dreamt of that stuff. That just interested me, and I was bored when Denise and my friend Patty they'd play house, and I was like, I don't want to play house, okay? So one of the things and there may be boys, okay, who are not real physical and don't want to be like Tyson, who said he loves to box, you know, he's a real boy, you know, and he was telling me that, and I just love hearing it, okay? But, you know, look at the child. What does the child want? Who are they? Ask them, what's important to them? Maybe they're more artistic. Maybe they're more, you know, don't force them into these categories. So if I was raised strictly only as a girl, which was kind of true, that would have been very, that's one of the reasons I became a feminist. I wanted to do other things. I have no regrets that I personally never had children. But that's not like most people. Most people long to have a family. Now, I love children. I love sort of big extended families. But I have that. But I didn't want to do it. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to do all this stuff. And I'm not saying that just because you have children and family that you don't want to travel the world. I mean, you can want that too. But I just didn't want it. So I want freedom for the individual. And you know, this can go the other way. I was talking to a physicist professor at Caltech, and so I was talking with this other woman, and they were bemoaning the fact that her daughter didn't speak up in class. Now, I was always getting in trouble. I was always like sitting up front, always asking questions. I was always getting used for unsatisfactory behavior. I was a little bit attention-seeking. I don't know what it was. But she was putting pressure. I could tell she was disappointed in her daughter because she didn't speak up. Or maybe the daughter doesn't want to speak up. Maybe she's more of a pensive type that just takes it in. I don't want to be forcing girls to go into STEM. But if there's a girl that's interested, or shows some interest in mathematics and engineering. There's plenty of us out there. I loved math for some reason, but it was kind of like a fluky thing. I mean, nobody was like, okay, let's study the math. You obviously have a mind for this and you like it. I got no encouragement. I didn't get super pushed down about it, but I got no encouragement. So that's what I want for kids. That's what I want. I want these opportunities. And so I do like that some of that has changed, but I don't want to so go in the other direction that girls that don't want to do these things are forced into them. But girls that have an interest, and all throughout history, there have been plenty of girls and women who want to do this. But I don't want to be a certain number, that it's got to be half. I want people to have opportunities. And I don't want them to be limited by, oh, you're a woman, you're a man, you can't do this, and whatever. It'll work out. But there's still only two sexes. Still only two sexes. Okay. I had a lot to talk about. This was fun. Maybe I'll talk to you next week. Thanks. Bye.